Good morning, and welcome to the Boulder Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship as we celebrate Pride Month today. I'm the Reverend Lydia Ferrante Roseberry. I'm the beloved minister of this congregation, and I'm joined today by Service Associate Brigitte Vieira, Tad Corieth, and Clara Kelly providing music. That might not be accurate, actually. And our tech ushers, Dave Leonard, Don Price, and Mary Stagpole, who help things run very smoothly for us. And the most important thing is that I am joined by all of you today, by this fellowship and all the wonderful people, for you are the reason that we do any of it. As I say our words of welcome today, I invite you to shift into gallery mode if you haven't already done so, and scroll through the screens so you can experience the beautiful diversity of this congregation. You are welcome here today. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, skin tones, shapes, and sizes that come together in your uniqueness, you are welcome here. In all the ways that you experience and express gender, you are welcome here. In the beauty that is who you love and how you love, you are welcome here. In all the ways you make your living and all the places you are from, you are welcome here. Christian, pagan, humanist, Jew, Buddhist, mystic, Muslim, Unitarian, Universalist, with all the traditions that inform your spiritual life, you are welcome here today. No matter how long you've been away and nor how soon until you return, you are welcome here. Whether you come with laughter in your heart or deep tears, you are welcome here. You are invited to join us with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. We welcome you today. I do have a few announcements this morning. Following today's service, I'll be holding another listening session for anyone who would like to be in UU community around the killing of George Floyd and the national uprisings in support of Black lives and against police brutality. You can join me at the Zoom link that's going up into the chat right now. I also sent it out onto the listserv yesterday. Also, after the service today, we're starting a School of the Spirit coffee hour for kids and youth of all ages. The link for that is going into the chat, and it'll be put on the chat again at the end of the service. Next Saturday, June 13th, is Fair Tax Day, and it's one way for us to put our values into action. Together Colorado is supporting a Colorado initiative that will help improve taxation so that we can get more things like for education for our youth and infrastructure for our country. They're holding a pop-up petition signing to get the Fair Tax Initiative on the ballot. I've put a link with information on the initiative into the chat, but I invite you to come to the fellowship, into the fellowship parking lot next Saturday between 9 and 1 for a physically distant, bring your own pen, wear a mask, petition signing event. Now, if you were at the annual meeting yesterday, then you've heard that we finally have our certificate of occupancy. And you know it is still a pandemic. So the state is relaxing some of its restrictions, but we are still being asked to be vigilant about social distancing and the wearing of masks whenever we are with other people. We also know how excited everyone is to see our finished project. So we are having a carefully planned open house on Saturday, June 20th, 2 weeks from yesterday, from 10:30 to 12:30 p.m. Only a few individuals or family groups will be let in at a time, and we'll have physically distanced hula hoops on the lawn for the gathering. And we expect to find a way to have a virtual open house as part of that event for anyone for whom showing up for that event does not match where you are in your life or your needs. So keep an eye out for more details and mark your calendar for March 20th. June 20th, sorry. If you're new here, we are glad you found us and hope that in this virtual community you can experience the warmth and the love of this congregation. Each Sunday is different here, so please come back a few times to really get to know us. If you want to get better connected, please see the chat window for a link to our first-time visitors page or email your information to the office manager. Her email address will be in the chat as well. And be sure to check out the fellowship calendar and Connections Weekly for all these ways we have to stay connected during the week. And finally, if any of you are new here today and would like to introduce yourself in the chat, please do. Just tell us your name and where you're from. We love to know who is among us. Everyone, especially newcomers, are invited to stay for a virtual coffee hour after the service or join in one of the other offerings that I just spoke about. And now we have a spotlight from our Neighborhood Connectors program.
Good morning. This is the Spotlight on Neighborhood Connectors. I want to share with you a little bit of what we do. Of course, everything we do is with your help and for you, our fellowship. Unselfishly dedicated their time to your service this year. Ladies, we appreciate you. These are the ladies that made it happen this year. The Boulder neighborhood, Longmont, which includes Berthoud, Dacona, Firestone, Frederick, and Niwot. The Bells, Brighton, Erie, Lafayette, Louisville, and Superior. The North Metro neighborhood, which basically includes everything else. I would like to extend an invitation to the Longmont neighborhood. We are in need of a connector for next year. If you might be interested, please contact me, Sharon Harden. Also, I want to shout out to my family who helped me get this slideshow ready. Thank you.
If you have a chalice at home, you can light it with me as I light our fellowship chalice. And so we know where all our chalices are. Please write in the chat, chalice lit in, and the name of your town. Please say the words along with me as I light our chalice. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. And now I invite you to center yourself as we sing the bowl a second time.
around, you can choose one special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. We've cleaned off the table, the leftovers saved, washed the dishes and put them away. I've told you a story, tucked you in tight at the end of your knockabout day. As the moon sets its sail to carry you to sleep over the midnight sea, I will sing you a song no one sang to me. May it keep you good company. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. There are girls who grow up strong and bold. There are boys quiet and kind. Some race on ahead, some follow behind, some grow in their own way and time. Some women love women, some men love men, some raise children, some never do. You can dream all the day, never reaching the end of everything possible for you. Don't be rattled by names, by taunts or games, but seek out spirits true. If you give your friends the best part of yourself, they'll give the same back to you. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whoever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done.
August 1st, 2017, UU Minister Otto O'Connor became First Parish Meldon's first openly transgender minister and one of the first openly trans religious leaders in the Boston area. He wrote these opening words last year to commemorate 50 years of Pride. On Holy Night in 1969, in an inn, also known as a bar, called the Stonewall Inn, is a basement, which had no running water nor safe fire exits. Queer people of many colors and kinds danced together, for it was the only place where they were allowed to dance, at least permitted to by the mafia who ran the inn. In those days, it was common for the police to frequent this inn, not to join in the dance, the underground celebration, but to send the dancers home and make arrests. When they would arrive, the lights would go on, the people would be lined up, and then all those in drag, all those who were trans, all those without proper identification, they were arrested and taken into custody. But on this holy night, that early morning of June 28th, the people said, "Not tonight." And as they called them to line up, the trans women refused to go. And as the police began to beat and arrest them, as the people spilled out from the bar onto the street, Christopher Street, a crowd grew to watch. And then, as trans women, lesbians, and gay men were arrested, a yell came from the crowd, "Gay power!" And as trans women were shoved, she shoved back, and the crowd began throwing bottles at the wagon, and suddenly it erupted. And for once, the people didn't line up, and for once, the people said, "No more. We've had enough." It was almost as if that night, being pulled out of the darkness of the underground at Stonewall Inn, one too many times they said, "I am ready to be seen." On this holy night, when the power of the oppressed rippled through the streets of New York, when queer people said no more, our world would never be the same. 50 years ago, it was illegal to be gay, to be trans, to dance and to love and to celebrate. And now, only 50 years later, here we are, celebrating at a church. Gay and straight together, queer and straight together, trans and cis together, all in this together. And so as we hear these stories of life and love and defiance and celebration, let us remember and pay tribute to our movement ancestors. Many of them trans women of color who led the first rebellion that night. You see, Pride is a celebration of that anniversary. The anniversary of that riot at the Stonewall Inn in New York City. A holy night. So happy Pride. Welcome to this joyful celebration. Bring your whole selves, your gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer selves, your drag queen, butch and femme, cross-dressing, nail painting, tutu-wearing selves, your gender queer, gender fluid, agender, pansexual, quilt bag selves, and all the other identities that are and will be. And let's have a celebration. Because joy is a rebellion too. And this church is queer. Queer and fabulous. Amen? Let us begin.
Thank you so much, Brigitte, for finding that beautiful, beautiful reading for us to begin this month of Pride, this first Sunday, and how, I'm just so struck by the time now where we are in another time of riots, and my hope and prayer is that 50 years from now, we will also be celebrating this as a time when deep change happened. I've been thinking a lot about what's normal lately and how I was raised to accept a paradigm of normal. Normal was my sheltered upper middle class town in New Jersey, with lush green lawns and beautiful lakes for swimming. Normal was my house that looked like all the other houses all the sitcoms on the 3 major TV networks were showing in the 1970s. Normal was my family with a cisgendered mother who worked at home and a white cisgendered father who worked a lot. Besides the fact that they had accents from Italy, it was pretty normal. My normal did not include the people of the Stonewall riots, which happened about 40 miles away from my home. My normal did not include the growing free love movement in San Francisco, or gay, lesbian, or trans parents. My normal didn't include people of color, let alone interracial relationships. So much was left out. The way things were when I grew up was that white boy meets white girl, white boy is erotically attracted to white girl, and white boy and white girl marry and have kids. That was normal, and almost anything else wasn't even an option. My normal also included this sexist twist of girl needing a man to survive, because she's the more vulnerable of the genders, but also needing to be fearful of men's erotic desires. And this story was supported everywhere I looked. The media, my friends and their parents, what I learned in school, it was supported everywhere. In a tightly bound story of normal, there is no room to question, and often little room to grow. And what's even worse is that everything outside of this narrative is fair game for shaming, demonizing, oppressing, and criminalizing, even killing. But normal, as we know, is a loaded word, and it's been misused throughout history. The hierarchical ordering of races led to the foundation of slavery, which was one time accepted as normal. So it's only by questioning these foundations of the consensus of what normal is that it can be dethroned, that we can begin to open up to the variety, the beautiful variety of the ways that we live as human beings. And I think that's why I instinctually moved to San Francisco in my early 20s. It's often said that anyone who moves to the Bay Area in their 20s is questioning something. Actually, that's something I've often said, perhaps from my own experience. So as I began to meet queer people, although they didn't call themselves queer then, and explore my own sexuality in that less restrictive environment, I came to terms with the flow and continuity of my own desires, and so much unlearning needed to happen. And it's a process that continues to this day. Here's a little something to shake your own foundations of normal. Did you know that in 1901, Dorland's Medical Dictionary defined heterosexuality as, quote, abnormal or perverted appetite toward the opposite sex? That's right, abnormal. More than 2 decades later, in 1923, Merriam-Webster's dictionary also defined heterosexuality as morbid sexual attraction for one of the opposite sex. It wasn't until 1934, less than 100 years ago, that heterosexuality was graced with the meaning that we're familiar with today: manifestation of sexual passion for one of the opposite sex. And then, normal sexuality. I share this history. It all comes from a BBC Features article entitled The Invention of Heterosexuality, written by award-winning journalist Brandon Ambrosino, who is also pursuing a PhD in theology and ethics at Villanova University. Much of his work from this article comes from a book by the same title, written by Jonathan Ned Katz. So how can that be, that something as normal as heterosexuality could, less than 100 years ago, have been considered abnormal? Queer theorist David Halperin wrote, "Sex has no history because it's grounded in the functioning of the body. Sexuality, on the other hand, is a cultural production, so it does have a history." So while sex is something that appears hardwired into the species, the naming and categorizing of sex acts and those who practice those acts is historical and should be studied as such, even or perhaps especially when it gets considered normal. We've been kind of used to studying homosexuality and the things that we consider not normal, but that keeps this binding of a normal versus atypical or abnormal. Now, in my growing up days, even normal heterosexuality or desire or eros was still considered shameful, something to be feared, because it was in a rubric that separated procreative from non-procreative sex or recreative sex. Now, many of us would attribute that to biblical roots. Certainly my parents were raised in Italy and Catholics. But this actually originated with the Stoics. The first century Stoic philosopher, Musonius Rufus, argued that individuals must protect themselves against self-indulgence, including sexual excess. So, to curb that sexual indulgence, the argument was that sex could only be moral in the pursuit of procreation. This got taken up by early Christian theologians, and by the time of Augustine, reproductive sex was considered the only normal sex. Until that 1934, when we could see that sexual attraction began to be considered in the realm of normal. It wasn't until the 1880s that eros was even opened for discussion as a part of sexuality. Austro-German psychiatrist Richard von Krafft-Ebing wrote, "In sexual love, the real purpose of the instinct, the propagation of the species, does not enter into consciousness." So what he was saying there, which was really the turn, the shift, was that sexual instinct contains something like a hardwired reproductive aim, even if we're not aware of it because we're engaging in it for another reason. So that means that by placing the reproductive side on the side, Krafft-Ebing created a small, obscure space in which the new pleasure norm for sexuality could grow. There is an importance in this shift from reproductive instinct to erotic desire, and it can't be overstated because it's crucial to the modern notions of sexuality in which eros does come into play. It was a fundamental revolution in thinking about sex. In 1948, things opened up even more if we think about this from the intellectual, the mind level, when Alfred Kinsey opened up our ideas of sexuality as being on a continuum. When his landmark study concluded that a large, if not majority, of men had at least some homosexual experience between adolescence and old age. That opened things up for sure, but still kept them on a continuum between two poles, heterosexual and homosexual. A recent poll in the United Kingdom found that fewer than half of those aged 18 to 24 identified as 100% heterosexual. So what's normal is going through a glorious revolution. Jane Ward, who's the author of a book called Not Gay, asked this question about the future of sexuality. What would it mean to think about people's capacity to cultivate their own sexual desires in the same way we might cultivate a taste for food? Now, some people might be weary of allowing for the possibility of that much sexual fluidity. But researchers are really getting clear now that the born this way arguments aren't acceptable, really, in the most science. So nobody's sure what causes this wide range of sexuality, but we certainly are certainly rejecting any theories that posit it's a simple one-stop origin like a gay gene. Sexual desires, like all of our desires, shift and reorient throughout our lives and ask us to look at new identities, both for ourselves and for others. So we could imagine that cultivating sexual preferences could seem fitting. Now, it can be mind-boggling to explore how much of what we consider normal is simply a construct of our times. But it is essential for our work for compassion and justice. Normal continues to create a dichotomy for abnormal, which leads to shame, oppression, decriminalization, and even death. These last 50 years have been a time of deconstructing what we consider normal in lots of areas, and especially in the area of sexuality. My 18-year-old daughter's world contains such a broad conceptualization of normal sexuality. Recently, just last week, one of our neighbors came out as being in a polyamorous household, polyamorous family. When I asked Talia, who babysits for that family regularly, if she knew about that, she just shrugged and said, yeah, as if like, no big deal, Mom. What a far cry from my normal childhood. But let us not forget, however, that there is still so much to do. Let us not forget that queer lives are still lost to ignorance and oppression and to suicide each and every day. Let us not forget that the movement for LGBTQ rights started with a riot, and what a long, hard fight it has been, a fight for dignity and worthiness that is not over by any means. It was not until last year, 50 years after the Stonewall riots, that the New York City police issued a formal apology to the LGBTQ community. In today's heightened awareness of police brutality against the Black community, this is sobering indeed. It is our job to continue to learn and grow, to bring compassion and conviction to any concept of normal that dehumanizes others. Let us begin, yes, let us begin and continue to affirm the beloved diversity of human creation. With our hearts, let us celebrate love and gender in all its forms. And with our minds, let us unbox ourselves from the falsely constructed binaries of gay or straight, male or female, him or her, single or coupled. And with our bodies, let us enjoy Eros in all of its forms and defend against anything that would dehumanize it. Let us celebrate love and bodies, because joy is a rebellion too. May it be so.
Each week, we remind ourselves of the abundance of our lives and this community by giving half our plate away to those organizations that share our values. Today, we invest in our future, and we offer our plate to support the Mountain Desert District Camping Ministries, nominated by Jessica Lakeman, our Director of Lifespan Faith Formation for our fellowship youth. This year, all 4 districts of our Pacific Western region will gather virtually for Fusion 2020, a virtual week-long, multifaceted event for middle and high school youth. Regional UU experiences create safe, affirming, and inclusive spaces for youth to learn about community, spirituality, and justice while making friends. For many, camp is one of the only places where their authentic selves are seen, heard, and celebrated. For some LGBTQ youth, UU youth camps have been quite literally life-saving. Please give generously as you are able to when the virtual plate passes. And as our musical reflection begins, we invite you to reflect on the people and the moments of your life that had an impact on your spiritual development. Please write into the chat your reflection to this question: who or what has taught you the most about compassion?
For the work of this fellowship, bringing love, reason, compassion, and justice to this world, and to the Mountain Desert District Camping Ministries, offering models of justice and compassion to our next generation. We dedicate these offerings to you.
And now we sing.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
We invited stories in today, stories of compassion and pride, and we heard from 3 members. The first one comes from Jean Canella. One can learn a lot at a funeral, things that had been forgotten or stored and brought out into the light with new appreciation. So it was at my brother's funeral last week. One of his friends from high school and the best man at Jim's wedding said to me, "I always envied how confident your brother was. No matter the task, he was sure he could do it. After having dinner at your house a few times, I realized he was confident because he grew up in a home that loved him." My brother was a civic, district, and state appeals court judge. Louisiana was getting ready to build a new courthouse, and my brother Jim and 2 other judges flew to Denver to look at the new courthouses that had recently been completed. There was a day in his schedule where we would have free time to do whatever he chose to do. I suggested to him to visit Rocky Mountain National Park and thought that the time in the car would be the perfect opportunity to formally come out to him as a lesbian. I drove to Denver and picked him up at the Brown Palace as we continued up to Rocky Mountain National Park. We drove through the park and I pointed out places I enjoyed hiking or unique geology, such as the Knife Edge, that only place along Trail Ridge Road without barriers and a direct drop down off to the side of the road. It was on the way back to Denver that I took a deep breath and told Jim that I was a lesbian. There was a moment of silence, and then I started to cry. "What's wrong with you?" he asked. I said that I was worried that he would not let me see my nieces and nephews, and I knew so many others who were banished from their families because of being gay. He said to me, "I don't agree with your being gay, but you're always my sister, and that will never change, and I will always love you."
This next story is from Anne-Marie Jensen. My sister has been with her wife for 13 years. When they began as a couple, her wife was in the military. She is an American Samoan and was being promoted to full colonel, which at that time made her the highest ranking American Samoan ever in the US Army. I attended the ceremony. This was during a time of don't ask, don't tell. At these ceremonies, the spouse pins on the colonel insignia onto the uniform, and top brass are present. During the ceremony, my sister pinned on the insignia onto her partner's lapel. There were several generals present and other high-ranking military. None of them seemed to care about the same-sexness of the ceremony. I got the sense that as military, they supported a colleague and a fellow soldier who had been rewarded for a job well done, and that was all that mattered. I had tears to see the support they had as a couple from people who were not supposed to be providing it. My family, on the other hand, struggled to accept my sister's sexuality, being very religious. However, my sister and her partner were recently married, and all but a few of the family found their way to attend the wedding and support them in this joyous occasion. It has always been a lesson to me in keeping lines of communication open and not writing people off. Perhaps they will come around to see beauty and truth, and if they don't, it won't be because you closed the door to it.
Lydia, you're muted.
From Clara Kelly. I have experienced both compassion for myself and from others on my journey towards coming out. It was a long road from fundamentalist Christian good girl to Unitarian Universalist bi woman, and I needed so many compassionate voices along the way to help shape my path and let me know that I was safe and loved. I'm grateful to the many friends who gently expressed to me over the years that there was nothing wrong with being gay, who were gay and who loved my judgmental self anyway. I'm grateful to family members who came out before me and made me feel safe and loved. I'm grateful to the many books and movies that gently beat against the door of my closed, frightened heart and told me that it was beautiful to be myself. And now I'm extremely grateful for this welcoming community that gave me the safest of all, place of all, to fully awaken to who I am and who I love. Your compassionate and powerful welcoming is a big part of what helped me realize my sexuality. So thank you all for being that safe place for me. Now I invite us into our time of community connection. Oops, no, now we're going to sing. Clara's going to sing for us.
You are ready. How could anyone ever tell you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
And now I invite us into our time of community connection, our time of sacred sharing. Don will remind you of how to let us know you'd like to share. And when you do, whether it's by voice or by chat, please tell us your name and where you live, and then briefly let us know what is in your heart today. And I will put a stone in our sacred waters on your behalf. Beloveds, we are living in disruptive times, times that are asking more of us than we might have ever thought possible. Times that can feel confusing, but also clarifying. Times like this create the great shifts in our culture, the great openings for future generations. We can look back, as some of you have, in our joys and concerns, and share the gratitude for those with courageous love in the past. And we can pray that we will be those people who others will look back for when they recount the many changes that have occurred. We must come together with our courageous love, willing to make mistakes, willing to put ourselves on the line, body, mind, and spirit, to put an end to oppression, suffering, and especially death at the hands of our government. Some of you will take to the streets, some of you will join organizations, some will sign petitions. May none of you choose to remain still and silent. This is an opportunity right now, in this moment, even in our own pandemic houses. This is an opportunity to radically shift something in our country. To radically shift systemic racism, homophobia, transphobia, and police brutality as something that is considered normal, and to shift to a country that lives up to its ideals of freedom and equality for all people. These values are rooted within our Unitarian Universalist tradition. It is a time for compassion, which means to suffer with, and from that deeper awareness of our profound interconnection, to act in concert with those who are most vulnerable. Let our calls for justice be rooted in the same love that fuels our deep caring for one another. A call that invites us into prayers and practices of compassion and conviction. May this be our promise and our prayer, and may you know that together we can support each other to bring love and justice into the world. Blessed be. Let us go forth, celebrating the complexity and the diversity of love and the joy that is also rebellion. Let us go forth siding with love in our streets, in our homes, and in our world, bringing a more just and compassionate world for all. Let this be our calling each and every day. Blessed be. Amen.